President Whitman, thank you very much. Good afternoon. To President Whitman, Chairman Sullivan, Trustees Breland, Corsi, Cuck, and Rifkin, distinguished faculty and staff members, parents, siblings, and other relatives of our graduates, friends of the college, and most especially, members of the class of 2023, it is an honor and a trip to be here. I first arrived on this campus 40 years ago as a nameless, aimless graduate of a big public high school in the New York suburbs. Based only on the picture of me in the freshman Facebook, feathered hair parted down the middle, cheeseball mustache, police concert t-shirt, you would not have pegged me then as the person who'd be giving this speech today. I certainly wouldn't have. But you know, Hamilton made me into who I am, just as it's made you into who you'll become. You may not know it yet, but trust me, it's happened. Let me say a few words about, in my case, the becoming. I was a political junkie growing up, the kind of kid who read Time magazine when everybody else was reading Sports Illustrated. When I couldn't fall asleep, instead of counting sheep, I tried to recite the names of the 100 U.S. senators. By the time I got to Jesse Helms, I was usually drifting off. So when I registered for my first semester as a first-year student here, as you heard from President Whitman, I took everything in the government department I could get my grubby hands on. I literally mainlined government classes. This continued in my second semester and for the entire next year. After all, there were no requirements that I take boring subjects like science, so why not? As I've learned to say in Texas, dance with the girl that brung you. My junior year, when all my friends were in Barcelona studying architecture or Florence studying art, I indeed went to Hamilton's Washington program to work on the uppermost floor of a congressional office building, signing letters with a signing machine, and then in the basement of the Federal Election Commission doing God knows what. I honestly can't remember. The nation's capital, my dream come true, except I hated it. This was the most miserable place, and these were the most miserable people I ever could have imagined. I could not wait to get back to Clinton. And when I did, I was heartsick. I'd always wanted a career in politics. It was too late to switch my major. I whined and moaned to everybody who would listen. One of those who did was Lee Haber, who I referred to earlier as Trustee Cuck, the very same. She was on the Washington program with me, and she was the incoming editor of The Spectator. After I told her about my sinking spell, she took pity on me and offered me a column in the newspaper. If I didn't want to work in politics anymore, at least I could write about it. I accepted, and I liked doing it, and I was launched. I'm happy to say that as a result of that pivot, I have been a journalist for the last 36 years, and she is responsible. But I also have to give credit to a few other people on this campus at that time. The late Misty Gerner, the late Fred Wagner, the late Sidney Wertimer, Gene Tobin, Frank Anacarico, and Ted Eismeyer. Professors who gave me confidence, taught me to write, taught me to think critically, and made me appreciate that there was a world beyond my front door. As hard as it is to fathom, it was in this tiny community that I expanded my worldview and my horizons, which is exactly what every excellent institution of higher education is supposed to do. This weekend is when we celebrate your own version of life-changing progress. Let's acknowledge what the 506 amazing people graduating have done. They've moved from starting it to finishing it. They've moved from talking about it to doing it. They have accomplished something truly significant against a backdrop of truly unbelievable events. To the students, the majority of you entered as first-year students in 2019, the fall before everything shut down. For more than 2 years, you endured a public health emergency, the likes of which we haven't seen for a century, maybe ever. Your freshman and sophomore years, an economic collapse put millions of Americans out of work, perhaps members of your own family. At the end of your freshman year, George Floyd was murdered. The resulting reckoning over systemic racism continues to this day. In your sophomore year, we had a hot mess of a presidential election, followed by an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol that put our democracy at risk. And it remains at risk 2 years later. I could go on. Seriously, the fire hose of catastrophe and calamity has been turned up to the highest setting during the time you've been here. And yet here you are. You had plenty of excuses to hit pause. You had any number of reasons to be derailed. But you didn't and you weren't. You stuck with it. Way to persevere. Way to be resilient. I don't think we can say that often enough to the class of 2023. I want to say that's especially, yes, give them a hand, that's right. That is especially true of the 75 students among this year's graduates, 15% of the graduating class who are first in their family to go to college. Ideally, higher ed sets the table of opportunity for all. It obviously did for you and yours. Congratulations and well done. Having graduated, all of you on Monday get to join the ranks of those of us trying our best to make sense of an often confusing, increasingly cruel, and dynamically changing world. What is the word I've heard my own kids who are not much older than you use to describe this? Adulting. Adulting is your reward for making it to the other side. But actually, we're the ones being rewarded, the rest of us. Your presence in all of our lives as colleagues, neighbors, and friends translates into fresh eyes, boundless energy, and another set of hands deployed to solve the problems created by the generations that came before you. God, we have screwed things up, haven't we? We've screwed up the environment, we've screwed up equity, we've screwed up the economy, we've screwed up voting. I'm galled these days by many things, but particularly about the way we've made partisanship a virtue and compromise a vice, as if talking to someone who disagrees with you is a fate worse than death. The way we've let the misinformation virus out of the test tube, giving oxygen and airtime to kooks and weirdos, so that when we're battling an actual virus, people don't know who to trust or what to believe. The way we've politicized the simplest things, library books, renewable energy, sports. We've lost our way, and we've lost our minds. We make everything about what's good for us individually, when it ought to be about what's good for all of us. The common good, the public good. The answer to every question is not subject-verb liberty, but nor is it subject-verb grievance. We've become too hard and too soft all at once. We have to get over that and get over ourselves and recenter. We have to promote and elevate the value of something larger, the value of community. It is on you and yours to succeed where me and mine have failed. Now, what will it take? It's helpful to remember that the blessings of citizenship come with obligations and responsibilities. Civic participation and civic engagement, kindness, compassion, charity, honesty, decency, cheerfulness and equanimity, an even keel when things don't go your way, and humility when things do. Perspective. If the last couple of years taught us anything, it's to take pleasure in small victories, to appreciate what's working in your life, and to be forgiving of others and yourself. Perhaps the biggest obligation and responsibility is that you acknowledge reality, that you accept the world you're living in. Another way we've screwed up is we've allowed people to live in an alternate universe that exists only in their heads, one in which truth is subjective. The late Pat Moynihan, the longtime U.S. Senator from this state, admonished us that we're entitled to our own opinions, but not to our own facts. He must be spinning in his grave. The 2020 election was not stolen. The pandemic was not a hoax. Climate change is real. There, I said it. Now you can tell your kids that your baccalaureate speaker was a woke lunatic from the fake news media. In fact, what I am is someone who believes in telling it like it is. We need more of that. We need more facts, reality, and truth. We need more good information to push out the bad. But who'll provide it? This is my sweet spot, and here's my spiel. Since 2005, a quarter of the nation's newspapers have shut down. By 2025, it'll be a third. 70 million of us in this country, 1/5 of the nation's population, have no local source of news or one about to topple over. Many of those 70 million are people of color. The majority live in counties where the median household income is below the national average. We live in two Americas, one informed and one not. No wonder voter turnout is miserable and polarization is off the charts. No wonder conspiracy theories are out of control. Making matters worse, we live in the United States of confirmation bias. We put earbuds in our ears as we make our way through our day to keep the outside world out. We self-exile. We curate our cable channels and our social media feeds and our satellite radio dials so the only voices we hear are the ones already in our heads. We can go a lifetime without encountering a point of view different from our own. This is what's killing us. It is the poison coursing through all of our veins. Believe me when I tell you, robust, reliable, credible, nonpartisan, freely accessible, nonprofit news, journalism in the public interest, is the antidote to the poison. This is how I spend my every waking minute these days, trying to strengthen the local news ecosystem, that antidote, from coast to coast and border to border, and in the process, strengthen our democracy, which needs all the help it can get. Any of you who want to join me, put up a hand. A couple of hands up in the back, that's good. All right. I am conscious of the time. You need to get down to the Rock. There's a Utica club with your name on it. But before I go, I want to do what anyone who's ever up here has done, and that's offer a little bit of advice on the way out the door. The hack here is that these bits of advice are lifted from other people with credit. The first I'm going to borrow from Glenn Powell, the actor who played Hangman in Top Gun Maverick. You probably were not expecting that. He was the commencement speaker 2 weekends ago when my own son graduated from the University of Texas. Glenn, who is not just a Texan, but more importantly, an Austinite, told the assembled students that when you go to a party at someone's house, bring queso. Very on brand, but also very deep. You could take that to mean carry delicious melted cheese with you wherever you go, but I choose to believe it was metaphorical queso. It was about being courteous and showing gratitude, about not taking anyone or anything for granted, about not showing up to life empty-handed. Sidebar to this, Glenn also said always write thank you notes. I think he actually meant always write thank you notes. It's basically the same point. The other bit of advice is from someone you have never heard of. It was the summer of 2000, and I was in the office of my boss, Gregory Curtis, at Texas Monthly. Greg had been the magazine's editor for 19 years and was retiring. I'd been his deputy, and in a few weeks, I'd succeed him. What wisdom did he have for me as I took on this awesome job? What I couldn't help thinking about at the time was the peaceful transition of power in this country every 4 or 8 years. Hilarious, right? The outgoing president writes a handwritten note and leaves it in the drawer of the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. What I was essentially asking Greg was, what would you write in that note? He was a man of few words, but even by that standard, his answer was cryptically brief. Show up, he said. At first, I didn't get it. Show up? You mean like come to work? After a beat or two, I figured out where he was coming from. He meant show up. Be present. Don't waste a day or an hour or a minute. If you're going to take the job, do the job. Arrive at the office every day like a batter in the on-deck circle, in uniform, swinging a bat with a donut on it, waiting for your turn at the plate. Be eager to get in the game. And when you're in the game, play your heart out. Show up. I've always tried to do that. I've always tried to be as present as I can be, to show up in every meeting, at every event, in every interview I conduct, in this speech. It's a sign of my seriousness and my commitment, and in my experience, it's always noticed. From Greg to me, from me to you, that's my message to the stout and stalwart class of 23. We need your attention and curiosity and creativity. We need your enthusiasm and idealism and pragmatism. We need you to tell us which things are lit and which things are mid. Show up. You are the ones we've been waiting for. But more important, you are the ones you've been waiting for. The solution to all of our problems, the enabler of all of our aspirations, the answer to all of our prayers is you. You've got this. Thanks so much for letting me share this special day with you. As I tell every young person I meet, feel free to call or write to ask for help when you get out into the world, but I don't think you're going to need it. I wish you all the best. Thank you.